Rain drummed softly on the windows, a gentle, unrelenting lullaby that seemed to echo the pounding of her heart. The chapel was shrouded in a fragile silence, broken only by the distant hum of thunder and the faint whisper of tears threatening to spill. In that quiet storm, time itself felt suspended, each heartbeat a fragile tremor, each breath a fragile hope. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of blooming lilies, yet beneath this serene surface lurked a storm of vulnerability, waiting to ignite. She stood at the altar, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her bouquet, her eyes flickering with a mixture of love and trepidation. Outside, the rain blurred the world into a watercolor haze, masking the anxiety that gnawed at her soul. Every detail, the flickering candlelight, the soft rustle of her gown, became a symphony of fleeting moments, fragile and fleeting as dawn's first light. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, hopes, and fears spiraling into the abyss of what was to come. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and the air shifted. A figure stepped in, a tall, imposing man whose presence seemed to command the room. The whispers hushed, and all eyes turned. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto the modest waitress standing quietly near the back. In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, as he approached with a calculated stride. The moment was razor-sharp, an electric jolt that cut through the delicate fabric of the ceremony. His voice, sharp and dismissive, pierced the air as he spat words that seemed to freeze time itself. The waitress flinched, her face draining of color, as if the weight of his contempt had struck her to her core. The room, once filled with the promise of love, now trembled on the edge of chaos. And in that suspended universe, the bride's eyes widened, her heart pounding louder than the thunder outside, as she realized the storm was only just beginning to unravel. But as quickly as the humiliation unfolded, something shifted, a quiet, unspoken resolve blossomed in her eyes. The rain outside continued its relentless song, yet inside, a different kind of storm was awakening. One fueled not by fury, but by a fierce, unwavering love that refused to be broken. The moment hung in the air like a fragile bloom, delicate yet resilient. And as the world waited for the next act, she took a breath, a quiet, powerful act of defiance, and whispered to herself that some storms are born not to destroy, but to reveal what truly matters. In that silence, in that storm, there is a story waiting to be rewritten. And sometimes, the greatest strength is found in the calm before the next thunderclap. She moved through the world like a ghost wrapped in a fragile shell, her steps quiet and weighted with unspoken sorrow. Every glance around her felt like a whisper of rejection, a reminder of the distance she carried inside, an ache that never quite healed. Her eyes, often cast downward, held a quiet sadness, a reflection of the loneliness that clung to her like a shadow. The faint tremor of her hands betrayed her calm exterior, trembling with memories she dared not voice. She had learned early that the world's applause often masked a silent ache, an ache of feeling invisible, of loving from afar and never quite being enough. Her days were painted in muted tones, her nights a tapestry of restless sleep and fleeting dreams. She had once believed love was a quiet promise, a gentle touch that would somehow fill the emptiness. But love had slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. She remembered the ache of rejection, the quiet tears she hid behind her palms, the hollow ache of wanting to be seen but always remaining unseen. Her heart, battered and tender, carried scars that no one could see, marks etched deep by years of silent longing and heartbreak. She worked tirelessly, not for recognition, but to find purpose amid her quiet despair. Her hands, once delicate and steady, now bore the traces of countless sacrifices, small cuts, roughened fingertips from endless hours of service. She was used to being overlooked, dismissed as just another face in the crowd, her presence barely registering in the grand tapestry of life. Yet, beneath her fragile exterior, a flicker of resilience persisted, an unspoken hope that someday, somehow, her pain might be acknowledged, her worth recognized. Today, she stood at the back of the room, a silent witness to a love she had only dared to dream of. Her chest tightened as she watched the bride radiant and vulnerable, trembling with anticipation. She knew that feeling, dread mixed with hope, the trembling that comes before the storm. She was no stranger to pain, no stranger to the quiet tears that threatened to spill when the world was unkind. But still, she held on to that faint flicker of hope. Perhaps someday, her own story would take a different turn. Perhaps her wounds would heal, and she would find a love that accepted her, not in spite of her fragility, but because of it. As she watched the ceremony unfold, her mind drifted to the quiet corners of her heart, a place where her pain could breathe, where her tears could fall unseen. The world outside her wounds was vast and indifferent, yet within her, a quiet resilience persisted. She longed for her story to be rewritten, not by grand gestures or miraculous salvation, but by the slow, delicate process of healing, step by step, moment by moment. And so, she stood there, a silent testament to the strength of vulnerability, waiting for her own dawn to break. Because sometimes, the greatest courage is simply to endure, to hope, and to believe that even in the deepest wounds, life can bloom anew, fragile, resilient, and full of quiet promise. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and something else, an unspoken tenderness that seemed to settle quietly in the air. The street outside was alive with muted sounds, footsteps, distant laughter, the occasional car passing by, yet inside, everything felt suspended, as if time itself paused to witness a fragile moment of change. She had been standing there, lost in her thoughts, when a faint shuffle of footsteps drew her attention. It was an older man, slightly hunched, with a weathered face that bore the marks of years lived quietly, almost unnoticed. His clothes were plain, a little worn, and his eyes carried a gentle, hesitant warmth, as if he didn't quite know how to approach or be approached. He moved slowly, almost unsure of himself, but there was a softness in his gaze, an unspoken kindness that didn't demand recognition or gratitude. He stopped a few feet away from her, casting a glance that lingered just long enough to feel personal, yet humble enough to remain unnoticed by others. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled paper tissue, nothing grand or dramatic, just a simple act of kindness. The gesture was so understated that it might have gone unseen, yet it touched her more profoundly than any grand gesture could. She saw the faint flicker of worry in his eyes, as if he, too, carried silent burdens, unspoken regrets, or memories too heavy to voice. The tenderness of that moment was like a whisper, a fragile reminder that even amid the chaos of the world, small acts of genuine humanity persisted quietly, often unnoticed, but never insignificant. He offered the tissue with a slight, uncertain smile. It was neither a gesture of heroism nor an act of heroics. It was simply a human offering, an acknowledgement of another's pain, a moment of shared vulnerability. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then gently accepted the tissue, feeling the rough texture against her fingertips. It was a small act, but it carried an unspoken message: you are seen, you are valued, even in your quietest, most fragile state. He nodded softly, as if to say, "You're not alone," and then, without another word, turned away, disappearing into the flow of the street. She watched him go, her chest tightening with an unfamiliar warmth, something delicate and tentative, yet undeniably real. In that fleeting exchange, she felt a faint crack in the armor of her loneliness, a reminder that kindness often arrives in the most unassuming forms, in moments that seem insignificant but hold the power to shift a heart. As she looked back toward the room, the rain outside continued its gentle symphony, and her mind lingered on the quiet stranger, an imperfect man, carrying his own invisible wounds. But in his simple act, there was a silent promise that even in a world so often harsh and indifferent, small gestures could weave threads of hope and reassurance. She took a breath, feeling a gentle stir of something new, an acknowledgement that perhaps her story, too, could find moments of grace amid the chaos. Sometimes it's in the simplest acts, in the quietest encounters, that life begins to whisper its most profound truths. And maybe, just maybe, her own path could be gently redirected by the kindness of an imperfect stranger, reminding her that even in darkness, there is a flicker of light, soft, fragile, yet endlessly resilient. The rain had begun to soften, its steady patter whispering against the window pane as if offering a lullaby for the soul. She sat quietly, her hands clasped around a warm cup of tea, the steam curling upwards like a fragile thread connecting her to the world outside. The small apartment was quiet, save for the gentle sound of rain and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor beneath her. It was in these quiet moments that she often felt the weight of her solitude most acutely, yet today, something subtly shifted. From outside, a faint knock echoed softly, tentative and uncertain. She hesitated, then gently opened the door to find him, an unassuming neighbor with a weathered face and kind eyes. Without a word, he held out a small paper bag, inside which was a simple arrangement of bread and fruit, nothing fancy, just a humble offering. She looked at him, surprised by the gesture, and he offered a shy smile. It was a small act, but it felt like a thread pulling her out of her isolated cocoon, reminding her that kindness often arrived quietly, unannounced. Over the following days, their interactions grew slowly, like the first blooms of spring. He would often pass by her door, sometimes with a gentle wave, sometimes with a small, wrapped snack he'd leave outside her door if he saw her busy or weary. One evening, noticing her umbrella tucked awkwardly in a corner, he offered his own, an old but sturdy umbrella that had clearly seen many storms. She hesitated at first, the weight of her past wounds making her wary of opening up again. But as he held it out, her fingers brushed his, and in that simple contact, she felt a spark of human connection, an unspoken understanding that she was not alone in her quiet world. Sharing food became a ritual, small, unpretentious moments that stitched her loneliness into something softer. She would keep a small bag of tea or a piece of fruit ready, and if she caught him passing by, she would gently offer it, her hands trembling slightly with the vulnerability of giving. And he, in turn, would accept without ceremony, his eyes warm with appreciation. These exchanges, simple as they were, chipped away at the walls she had built around herself, brick by brick, gesture by gesture. One day, as she struggled with the weight of her grief, he simply sat beside her on the worn-out park bench, offering her the space to speak if she wished. She hesitated, then allowed herself to lean into the quiet presence beside her, feeling the comforting weight of someone who understood without needing words. The rain had stopped, but the sky lingered with a muted gray, a mirror to her own feelings, clouded, heavy, yet slowly beginning to clear. He didn't offer solutions or grand promises, only small acts, an umbrella shared under the drizzling sky, a warm meal offered on a cold day, a gentle walk when the world felt too loud. Each gesture seemed insignificantly small, yet they gradually wove a fragile tapestry of trust, breaking down her isolation, one quiet act at a time. But even as these moments of kindness built a fragile bridge between them, the outside world's chaos loomed, whispers of betrayal, the shadow of humiliation, and the storm that threatened to undo everything. Her heart, once so guarded, was now slowly opening, inch by inch, to the possibility that she could find solace in the simplest of human connections. In those small gestures, she glimpsed the truth. Sometimes, life's greatest acts of kindness are not in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet, persistent presence that reminds us we are not alone. And as the clouds gathered again on the horizon, she clung to that fragile hope, knowing that even amidst the looming storm, a single act of kindness could be the seed of something far greater. Because sometimes, it's in the smallest moments, an offered umbrella, a shared meal, that the first cracks of light find their way through the darkness, guiding us toward a new dawn. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow street, its golden light flickering through the leaves and illuminating the small, weathered sign outside her modest apartment. She had come to find a fragile sense of peace in these quiet moments, until the distant hum of gossip reached her ears like a dark cloud creeping over the horizon. Word traveled fast, sharper than any whisper, and in her world, silence was often more deafening than noise. That day, she had been walking home when she glimpsed a small group gathered near the corner cafe, a cluster of familiar faces, their expressions tense and eyes darting away when she looked their way. Rumors had begun to swirl, loud and relentless, carried by voices that sounded like accusations, about her past, about the shame that clung to her like a second skin. The whispers grew louder, a tidal wave threatening to drown her fragile hopes. She could feel her chest tighten, her breast shallow, as if the weight of their judgment pressed down on her, suffocating any flicker of confidence she had managed to nurture. It was not just the gossip. Her family's rejection loomed like a storm ready to break, her parents, once proud and supportive, now distant and cold. The silent disapproval in their eyes when she dared to show her face in the community felt like 1,000 tiny cuts, each one chipping away at her self-esteem. They had always been strict, their expectations high, their love conditional, an unspoken rule that to be truly accepted, she must conform, hide her past, and vanish into the background of their rigid world. Now, the fear of losing even that fragile thread of belonging gnawed at her deeply. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she hesitated before pulling it out. A message from him, simple, reassuring, a reminder that he was there, that he believed in her. But even his words could not shield her from the storm raging outside. The outside world had become her fiercest adversary, relentless and unforgiving. The community's judgmental eyes seemed to pierce her very soul, as if her worth was measured solely by their narrow standards. Every step she took felt heavier, weighed down by the external obstacles threatening to tear her apart. The whispers, the cold stares, the looming threat of exposure, they all tested the fragile bond she and he had been slowly building. Could their connection withstand the storm? Would her vulnerability be her undoing, or could it somehow become a shield against the mounting external pressure? As she reached her door, she paused, her hand trembling on the doorknob. The shadows of doubt flickered like sinister flames, whispering that her fragile hope might shatter under the weight of society's expectations. The external obstacle was not just gossip or rejection, it was the collective voice of a community that refused to see her as anything more than her mistakes, her past, her failures. It was the relentless tide of judgment that threatened to drown her, to erase the fragile bloom of trust she had begun to nurture. But amid the chaos, a faint, steady heartbeat echoed in her mind, the quiet reassurance of his loyal support. She remembered his steadfast presence, the way he never judged her but simply listened, offering his quiet strength when she felt most vulnerable. The external storm roared fiercely, yet within her, a tiny ember of hope flickered, fueled by the knowledge that she was not alone. That even amidst the judgment and rejection, there was someone who believed in her, in their fragile bond, and in the possibility of rising above the storm together. As she opened her door and stepped inside, she carried that ember with her, an unspoken promise that loyalty, patience, and small acts of kindness could be the anchor in a turbulent sea. The external obstacle was formidable, but it was not insurmountable. Sometimes, the fiercest storms only serve to reveal the strength of the roots that hold us steady, the quiet resilience that refuses to be uprooted. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in doubt and fear, but she knew one thing: the true test of loyalty was not in avoiding the storm, but in standing firm amidst it, trusting that even the darkest clouds could part one day, revealing a sky painted with hope. And in that hope, she found her quiet strength, waiting, enduring, and daring to believe that love and loyalty could weather any storm. He stood quietly just outside the sliding door, watching her retreat into the apartment with slow, deliberate steps. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched as if to make himself smaller, less conspicuous. There was no need for grand gestures or words, sometimes, just being there was enough. His presence was a steady anchor in a storm of chaos and doubt. He had seen her face moments before, the flicker of fear and pain flashing across her eyes, and he had felt the silent pull of her distress. Now he simply stayed, like the roots of a tree holding firm against the wind, unmoving but unwavering. As she moved to the small table, he followed at a respectful distance, not crowding her space but never leaving her side. She poured herself a glass of water, her hands trembling slightly. He watched her, noticing the way she fidgeted with the rim of the glass, the slight quiver in her voice when she finally spoke. It was in those quiet, unguarded moments that her true vulnerability seeped through, the raw, unfiltered emotion she had tried so hard to mask. He chose to remain silent, because sometimes words were too fragile, too inadequate for the weight of what she was feeling. Instead, he shifted his stance just enough to be present without intruding, his gaze gentle but firm. The silence stretched between them, an unspoken promise of loyalty and understanding. It was not an act of heroism, it was simply the human act of standing by someone in their darkest hour. In the stillness he observed her breathing, the way her shoulders rose and fell, the faint tremor in her hands. He saw how she clenched her fists, then relaxed them again, trying to regain control. He knew she was fighting a battle within, a storm of shame, fear, and heartbreak, yet here he was, unwavering, a quiet testament to her worth outside the judgments of others. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was a form of support, a gentle reminder that she was not alone. He simply stayed there, a constant in her tumultuous landscape, like a lighthouse flickering steadily in the distance. And in that quiet steadfastness, he conveyed what words could not, that her pain mattered, that her voice mattered, that her story was still being written, even amidst the chaos. She looked at him briefly, her eyes searching for reassurance, for a sign that she wasn't forgotten or forsaken. He offered her a small, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement of her strength, of her struggle, and of his unwavering loyalty. It was enough to fill the space between them with unspoken understanding. No grand promises, no miraculous cures, just human connection rooted in genuine presence. As she finally lifted her glass to her lips and took a tentative sip, he took a step closer, not to invade her space but to subtly be near. Perhaps she didn't need a hero right now, but she needed to know someone would be there when she looked up, when she faced the next hurdle. His loyalty was not born out of obligation, but out of a quiet conviction that her vulnerability was real, her pain justified, and her resilience worth standing for. The apartment was filled with a gentle silence, an affirmation that sometimes the strongest support is simply being present, quietly enduring alongside someone else. As the shadows lengthened with the setting sun, he remained, a steady beacon of unwavering loyalty. His silent strength was a gentle reminder that, even in the most turbulent storms, human connection, simple, steadfast, and genuine, could be a quiet anchor. And in that moment, she felt the faintest flicker of hope, the realization that she was not alone in her struggle, that someone's quiet presence could be enough to nurture the fragile seeds of inner transformation. Sometimes, the greatest act of support is just showing up, staying steady, and trusting that the storm will pass, leaving behind a clearer sky and a stronger heart. In the quiet aftermath of that tumultuous day, she found herself standing at the edge of a new beginning, though it didn't come with grand declarations or dramatic revelations. Instead, it arrived softly, like the first light filtering through a cloudy sky after a storm. Her reflection in the small mirror was tentative at first, eyes still carrying the echoes of pain, yet subtly shifting. A small smile touched her lips, hesitant but genuine, as if discovering a long-lost part of herself buried beneath layers of doubt and shame. It was not an immediate transformation, nor a sudden awakening, but a gentle awakening, an acknowledgement that her worth was no longer defined by external judgments or fleeting moments of humiliation. She began to remember the quiet strength she had always carried within, the resilience that had sustained her through countless silent battles. Over time, she started to create again. Simple things at first, a handwritten note, a small flower she picked from her balcony, a moment of stillness when she paused to breathe. Her purpose was no longer about fitting into others' expectations, but about rebuilding her own sense of meaning. She realized that her value was rooted in her ability to nurture herself, to find beauty in the mundane, and to craft her life with intention. She began to teach herself to smile more freely, to allow herself to dream without guilt, to see possibilities where before she saw only obstacles. Her dreams weren't loud or ostentatious. They were quiet whispers of hope, small seeds of a future she could nurture with patience and compassion. In her solitude, she started to write, pouring her thoughts onto paper, not for anyone else but for herself, a way to untangle the knots of pain and reshape her narrative. With each word, she reclaimed her voice, her identity, her purpose. The process was slow, often uncertain, but increasingly confident. She learned that her worth did not depend on external validation. It was something she carried within her, a quiet flame that no storm could extinguish. Her inner world grew richer, more resilient, as she found joy in the simple act of being herself. She didn't need rescue, she only needed to remember her own strength. The days turned into weeks, and her smile grew wider and more genuine, not because she pretended to be okay, but because she knew she was enough, just as she was. Her heart, once heavy with shame, now carried a gentle hope that she could inspire others not through grand gestures, but through her authenticity and quiet perseverance. She began to see herself as a vessel of resilience, capable of healing and growth, even after the deepest wounds. Her purpose shifted from seeking validation to creating value, whether through her work, her kindness, or her simple acts of self-love. She understood that the true power lay within, in the steady, unyielding core that no external storm could shake. As she stood on this new path, she could feel the subtle shift in her spirit, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. Her inner transformation was not a destination but a continuous journey, an ongoing process of rediscovery, self-acceptance, and renewal. And with each step forward, she carried the quiet knowledge that her worth was inherent, unchangeable, and rooted deep within her soul. In the coming days, she would carry this light into the world, no longer waiting for rescue, but shining from within, inspiring others to find their own strength. Because true resilience is not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it. It's the silent song of the heart that whispers, "I am enough," even in the face of doubt. And in that truth, she found her purpose, one that no external storm could ever take away. The day was warm and vibrant, a festival of colors and sounds that filled the town square with life. Banners fluttered in the breeze, and the aroma of freshly cooked food mingled with the laughter of children and the hum of conversation. It was a community celebration, an annual gathering that everyone looked forward to, a time when differences could be set aside and a shared spirit of unity could flourish. Among the gathered crowd, she stood on a small, makeshift stage, her hands trembling slightly, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and quiet resolve. The crowd's gaze was heavy, expectant, as she took a deep breath and looked out at the faces familiar and new, families, neighbors, friends, each one a witness to her journey, her struggle, and now her courage. The microphone felt surprisingly heavy in her hands, but she remembered her own words, her quiet promise to herself, that she would no longer hide in the shadows of shame. Today, she would stand openly, vulnerably, and speak her truth. She cleared her throat, voice steadying with each word. "Thank you all for gathering here today." Her voice was soft but clear. "I've spent too long afraid of what others might think. Afraid of judgment, of rejection, of losing my place in this community I've called home." She paused, searching the crowd's faces, seeing the flicker of curiosity, perhaps even hesitation. "But I realize now that my worth doesn't depend on the approval of others. It's something I carry within myself, something I've begun to rediscover over these past weeks." Her eyes lingered on a few familiar faces, some supportive, others unsure, but she pressed on. "Today, I want to show that I am no longer willing to be defined by past pain or external shame. I want to stand here, in front of everyone, because I believe that true strength comes when we face our fears head-on. When we accept ourselves, flaws and all, and trust that the community we build is stronger than any prejudice or misunderstanding. Her voice grew firmer, more confident. I have learned that my story is not over. That even in the face of humiliation, I can find purpose, not in seeking validation from others, but in honoring my own journey and supporting others who may walk a similar path. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a mixture of surprise and reflection. Some people shifted uncomfortably, others nodded slowly, their eyes now filled with a new respect. She saw her former doubts reflected in their faces. Perhaps they had not truly understood her, but now they saw her courage. That fragile, trembling woman who once cowered in silence was transforming into someone who dared to stand tall, openly embracing her worth. She took a step forward, voice rising with quiet conviction. I want to thank those who have supported me, those who listened without judgment, who believed in my strength even when I doubted myself. Today is not just about me. It's about all of us, about learning to accept our imperfections and celebrating the courage it takes to grow beyond them. The crowd erupted into gentle applause, some clapping hesitantly, others with genuine warmth. Her heart swelled with emotion, not because she had conquered everything, but because she had begun to reclaim her voice, her space, her dignity. As she looked out at the community that had gathered, she felt a sense of peace settle within her, like a dawn breaking after a long, dark night. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the scene, as if nature itself echoed her newfound confidence. She knew this moment was only the beginning, not a final victory, but a vital step forward in her journey of acceptance and resilience. Her story, once hidden in shadows, now illuminated the path for others to find their own courage. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the setting sun seep into her bones, whispering a silent promise that her voice, and the voices of all who dared to speak their truth, could ignite change, not just in her heart, but within the very fabric of her community. Because true acceptance is a collective act, a gentle, persistent bloom that begins with one brave step. And she had taken that step. Now, she would walk forward into the future, carrying the light of her truth, inspiring others to do the same, one quiet, courageous voice at a time. The soft glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the quiet garden, where the family had gathered once more, this time in quiet reflection rather than celebration. The air was thick with unspoken words, a fragile sense of reconciliation lingering like the last whispers of daylight. Among them, her father stood apart, his face lined with age and regret, eyes fixed on the ground. He had been silent for so long, carrying the weight of past mistakes, of words spoken in anger, of judgments made too quickly. Now, as he watched the woman who had once been his daughter, standing resilient and radiant, he felt something shift within him, an awakening that had been long overdue. He stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as if wading through memories that refused to stay buried. His voice, when it finally came, was hesitant but earnest. "I was wrong," he admitted softly, voice trembling with the honesty of a man who had finally faced his own shortcomings. "I saw only what I wanted to see, fear, pride, and misunderstanding. I believed I knew what was best for you, but I see now I was blind. I see now that I was wrong to judge you so harshly, to dismiss your worth based on my limited perceptions." His eyes, once filled with stubbornness, now shimmered with tears, tears that reflected remorse, relief, and a sincere hope for forgiveness. She looked at him, her heart pounding with a mixture of shock and slow, cautious hope. Her father's words were unanticipated, unfolding like a gentle breeze that stirs the dormant seeds of healing. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but steady. "It took me a long time to find my voice," she whispered. "To understand that I am more than the mistakes others have made about me. Today, I choose to forgive you, not because I forget what happened, but because I believe in the power of change, in the possibility of redemption." Her words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, like a delicate flower pushing through a crack in the concrete. As she spoke, the tears in her father's eyes spilled over, and he reached out, taking her hands gently, as if to hold the fragile bridge that connected their broken past with a hopeful future. "I see now," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "You are stronger than I ever imagined. Your courage has shown me what true strength really is, what it means to be vulnerable, to accept one's flaws, and to rise above them. I am sorry for all the pain I caused you, and I am grateful you have given me this chance, to learn, to grow, and to finally understand what truly matters." In that moment, the distance that once separated them dissolved, replaced by a quiet, profound understanding. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time, they carried no shame, only the acknowledgement that they had both endured, learned, and now, with patience, could heal. Her father's apology was not hurried or forced. It was a gift, tender and genuine, earned through years of silent reflection and unspoken love. The garden seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself recognized the significance of this moment. The petals of a nearby flower trembled in the gentle breeze, their delicate beauty echoing the fragile yet resilient bond that was now being restored. The family's silence was filled with unspoken promises, of acceptance, of understanding, of a future built on forgiveness and mutual respect. As the scene unfolded, it became clear that redemption was not a sudden miracle but a slow, deliberate process, woven into the fabric of their lives like threads of gold in a tapestry. The past could not be erased, but it could be transformed through patience, humility, and love. And in this quiet, sacred moment, they began to write a new chapter, one where wounds could heal, where tears could water the roots of growth, and where forgiveness blossomed into a stronger, more enduring bond. The sky darkened, and stars began to twinkle faintly above, whispering silent blessings. Somewhere deep within, a new understanding took root, deep and resilient, like the dawn after the storm. Because true redemption is a journey, slow and steady, guided by the gentle light of compassion and the unspoken promise that, even after the darkest night, dawn will always come. As the last whispers of evening settled over the quiet garden, a gentle hush enveloped the scene, like the soft breath of dawn slipping into the night. The stars, distant but unwavering, twinkled silently above, casting a faint, shimmering glow over the earth below. It was as if the universe itself had paused to bear witness to this moment of quiet transformation, of wounds slowly healing, of hearts opening anew. The sky, a vast canvas of dark velvet punctuated by tiny points of light, reminded everyone that even in darkness, there is always a promise of light. Not a sudden blaze, but a slow, patient glow, like the first hint of sunrise after a long, restless night. In that stillness, the air carried a sense of profound serenity, a reminder that love is not a fleeting miracle but a steady proof that no one truly walks alone. It is in the silent understanding, in the small acts of courage and forgiveness, that love quietly grows, like the delicate bloom of a flower after the storm. It's not about perfection or grand gestures, but about showing up, staying present, and trusting that even broken pieces can come together in a new, resilient form. The universe, in its infinite patience, whispers that we are all part of something larger, a tapestry woven with threads of hope, pain, reconciliation, and quiet strength. As the night deepened, a faint melody drifted through the air, a gentle, almost imperceptible song of wind and distant crickets, blending into the natural symphony of the night. It was a lullaby of sorts, soothing and enduring, reminding us that even in our most vulnerable moments, we are part of a greater rhythm. We are not alone in our struggles or our hopes. The stars above serve as silent guardians, witnessing our journeys, illuminating our paths with their unyielding light, however small or faint it may seem. And so, as you leave this story behind, remember that love's true power lies in its quiet persistence, the way it sustains us through storms, how it nurtures hope when darkness seems endless. Love is not a magical salvation, but a testament that, even in our deepest pain, we are never truly isolated. We are connected, always, by the invisible threads of compassion, understanding, and the courage to forgive. Like the stars that shine brightest in the darkest sky, our light can guide others through their storms, too. Let this story be a gentle reminder, in the silent spaces between words, in the stillness after tears, love patiently waits, ready to renew, to heal, to remind us of our shared humanity. So, take a moment today to breathe, to reflect, and to reach out, because no one is truly alone in this vast, beautiful universe. We are all part of its endless, luminous story. If this story touched your heart, consider sharing it with others. Like, subscribe, and pass along the message that love is always present, quietly shining in the darkness, waiting to be seen. Because in sharing light, we create more of it, one small act, one gentle word, one moment of understanding at a time. And in doing so, we remind ourselves and others that hope, healing, and love are woven into the very fabric of our existence, ever present, ever enduring, and always worth believing in.